Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is William Hemsworth. Thank you for joining me back on the channel. Honor to have my guest, Judson Carroll. He's a prolific author. He's a podcast host. He has a YouTube channel. I mean, he's done all kinds of stuff. His Substack bio says he's written 15 books so far, but I think it's more than that. And his recent book, Herbs That Heal, recently released by Sophia Institute Press. Judson, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. Yeah, I guess I'm up to about 20 now. I need to update the old bio, but one thing I do is I write daily reflections on the mass readings. Sort of like a daily devotional, and so I put out two of those a year. So I don't really count them among the number, because I have to keep redoing them every 6 months. I got a new one coming out on that. But yeah, I guess if it was all total, it'd be around 20 or so. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that. You have quite a few of them there on Amazon. And can you tell us a little bit about those books since we've stumbled on the topic? Like how do those work? Do you have all 3 years covered and you just keep going, or?
Yeah. Okay. So with the mass readings, I started working with Missio Day about 3-4 years ago. They say once a week, could you write a book on the daily gospel?
Okay.
I mean, an article on the daily gospel, a reflection. And I said, yeah, sure, we'll give that a shot. And then I thought, well, why don't I just do them for every day of the year? And so about a year in advance, I write the next 6 months and the next 6 months. So it'd be like January through June and then July through December. And sometimes I do the gospel. Sometimes I'll do the first reading or the second reading if it's a Sunday or something. Try to mix it up so I don't have a lot of repeats. Sometimes you get the same gospel for the same day 3 years in a row. Well, usually it's like 2 years and a year off, and it's back for 2 years. And it's like, what more can I say about this? So I'll try to pull, another reading and keep that in there, and send them out for free every day. If anybody's interested, just go to my Substack. It's the Uncensored Catholic. That's also where I do my Catholic podcast. So I love it when people buy my books and support my work. But you can get them for free if you want, and share them with friends, family, and loved ones. And I'm just thrilled for people to read them. Yeah, the other books are mostly well. As far as Catholic content, I got my conversion story. I converted to Catholicism when I was 24, and that's called Confirmation Autobiography of Faith. I've got two now, I guess, on the Catholic history of herbal medicine, which is really vast, and that's mostly what we'll be talking about today, I guess. And I've got a cookbook, and then I've got a bunch of, I've got one on foraging. I've got a cookbook, and I've got a foraging cookbook. And then I've got ones that are just on a lot of herbal medicine. I've chronicled probably well over 1,200 plants and their medicinal uses through my books. Got one it's herbal medicine for preppers, homesteaders, and permaculture people. We also get into gardening and all kinds of stuff. Growing Your Survival Herb Garden is another one that I did. And basically, for years, I worked in politics and journalism right out of college. I was hired in college by some congressmen and senators and such to write speeches, and by a newspaper. And actually, one of the biggest Catholic influences in my life was G. Gordon Liddy. And Mr. Liddy read one of my articles and encouraged me to do that. And, without him, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. Yeah. I did that. I had my own newspaper in North Carolina for a while, and it went totally broke around 2008. And I was back in the mountains, just about lost everything, And Obamacare had passed, so I had to take care of my own health care. I didn't have insurance anymore. And I was back to my roots as an herbalist. And I thought, I can talk about that a little bit more too. I started my apprenticeship as an herbalist at the age of 15. So I've been doing herbs for a long time. But at 30 or so, I'm 30 something, I'm back in the mountains and using herbs again. And I was online with some people on the Grow Network forum, which isn't around anymore. And I'm like, this is what I do when someone asks a question, and I just, give free advice. And someone said, well, you ought to write. And I'm like, well, I think everybody knows this stuff, don't they? And like, no, nobody knows this stuff. You need to write. So around 6 years ago or so, I started doing a podcast and started writing books. And, now I make a modest living at it. And it's pretty nice. I get to spend time in the woods which is really what I always liked. When I was a kid in school, like 10 years old, they were always fussing at me for staring out the window. And they're like, why are you always staring out the window? I'm like, because I want to be outside.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in here with you people. I want to be out there fishing or in the woods doing something, not in here. I hate air conditioning. I want to be outside. Of course, where I am right now, it's almost 100 degrees, and I love air conditioning. I am very grateful for air conditioning. We should have a
Amen to that.
air conditioning.
So how does being an herbalist fit in with the Catholic faith?
Well, it's interesting. Like I said, when I came back home after the newspaper and politics and all that, I had converted Catholicism. I converted Catholicism when I was about 24 or so. Excuse me. And I see herbalism was never presented to me as something like New Age or woohoo. I mean, the folks I learned from were old mountain people, multi generations in the Appalachian Mountains, very Christian. There was no weird stuff at all. It was just this plant does this, and that's the way I looked at it very practically. And I guess I just kind of like went to Amazon or something, and I just typed in herbal medicine and Catholic. And the first thing that popped up was an author named Maria Trebin. She was an Austrian herbalist who wrote a few books in the 70s and early 80s. And she really introduced me to the tradition of Catholic herbal medicine, which goes back to the beginning of the church, when the church started taking in all the sick. And pretty soon the Benedictines are formed. They're building hospitals, and one of their tenets was first care for the sick. And the Charlemagne wrote the Capitulaire, and he dictated that we grow medicinal herbs for use in medicine. And that's really how Catholicism spread throughout Europe, was free hospitals, orphanages, the monasteries that were feeding the poor and caring for the sick, really. And the first herbal of the Christian era was written about 700 AD or so by Abbot Walafrid Strabo, who was the tutor to Charlemagne's grandchildren and one of the most prolific Catholic writers in Germany at the time. And then we get up to like St. Hildegard von Bingen, and then we get into the 1800s with Fathers Nape and Kunzel and Brother Aloysius. And you can see this just like vast history of herbal medicine actually practiced by priests and nuns and monks. And really until around 1600, basically every hospital in Europe and Central Asia was Catholic. Every university that was teaching medicine was Catholic. Every single doctor was Catholic. And the medicine they used was plant-based, because with a few exceptions, like what you would call toxicology or like chemotherapy in our time, where they were using heavy metals and such for specific purposes, every single medicine they had was entirely plant-based. And that continued until about the 1920s, when modern pharmaceuticals started substituting chemical medicine for plant-based medicine. Like if you think about something like Valium, Valium is named because it was similar to the properties of the plant valerian. And, we could go through thousands of examples like that.
So what would you say to someone who says that, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, I just want to go back to it, that this is like doing herbal medicine is new age stuff.
Mhm.
Like, what would you say to someone who thinks that? I'm sure you've ran into that a few times.
Mainly that kind of got going in like the 60s, 70s. Around 1914 or so, the medical guilds had really gotten established in America. They had been around since the 1800s, at least in Europe. Really to the 1600s, but they were really gotten powerful as we're beginning to see this like transition of different kinds of government. We're starting to see these big socialist governments and Nazi governments and fascist governments. Well, in America, they were doing really the same thing. And they got these laws passed, some of which are good. Pure Foods and Drug Act of 1914. If you remember Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, he talks about all this like horrors in the meat packing and canning industry, and it's all child labor, and people were cutting fingers off and they're going right in your ground beef or something, right? He later admitted that he was a communist, and that the entire thing was a work of fiction meant to support labor unions, and because they didn't want to compete with child labor for their wages. They didn't really care about the kids. They just wanted to have their control, right? He said, I aimed at their hearts and hit their stomach. Well, so you got this stuff coming out, and the medical guilds really capitalized on that, and they said, we got to make patent medicine illegal. Up until that point, you could pick up your Sears catalog, you'd open it up, and there'd be cures for colds, cures for indigestion, all that. People just come up with their own formulas, and it was totally unregulated. And some of it was, really not good. I mean, you see a cough syrup that has heroin and marijuana in it as the two key elements, a little bit of regulation, not a bad thing. But what they came up with by essentially 1920, medicine could only be practiced by licensed doctors, and medicine could only be dispensed by licensed pharmacists. And they tried to make herbal medicine completely illegal. Well, until that time, herbal medicine and its practitioners, especially through the eclectic and Thomsonian schools of medicine in America, had been equal to or larger than the modern medicine establishment. You would go to a guy down the street and he was an herbalist, just the same way you go to a pharmacist and get a prescription. And, the pharmacist would be compounding in-house, or a doctor to get a prescription, then go to the pharmacist, whatever. So they made the practice illegal. So that's around 1920, right? So what's happened in England around 1920 or so? You get the neo-paganist movement. You're getting the Edgar Cayce's and all the seances, and people are getting back into Druidism and just making it up as they go, because they didn't really have anything written of what the Druids actually believed, except what the Romans said the Druids did, and sun worshippers and all that kind of stuff that G.K. Chesterton would write about in his Father Brown novels and such. And it was really big, and that moved to America. And so by the 20s, 30s, 40s, seances and the occult is huge. And Abraham Lincoln's having seances in the White House. He's super into the occult, and that's 1860s, 1870, right? So this is the period of time we're talking about. Those people began saying, well, the Christians took away our pagan heritage, which includes herbal medicine. And so they came up with all this just junk. They wrote all this stuff about druids and about witches and all kinds of stuff like that. It's really funny. Our modern concept of a witch was a beer maker in the Middle Ages. Women brewed the beer. They'd wear tall, pointy hats, so you'd know they were the beer maker. They had cauldrons, and when the beer was ready, they hung a broom over the door. And so, going back to the guilds, this goes back to the Pure Beer Act in Germany. They tried to outlaw home brewing. This is going back to 1500. They tried to outlaw home brewing, and they started portraying the brewmistresses as witches. And they said if you drank their beer, you'd have visions and see ghosts and such. Sometimes you probably would, because some of the stuff they put in the beer was a little weird. But anyway, so we're up to now the 1920s. They start to associate herbal medicine with paganism and witchcraft. And so you get to the 60s and all the LSD and all, stuff, the peyote and all that. You've got that guy, Carlos Castaneda, writing his books like Don Juan, and he was a total fraud. Castaneda wrote, I don't even know, probably 20 books in the 60s and 70s about how he had gone to Mexico and met a shaman and took, a bunch of peyote and mushrooms and had all these visions, and he formed his own cult, and he had his little band of witches with him and everything. And he starts promoting herbal medicine and such. Turns out the guy made the whole thing up. He got the stuff out of books from a college library. He was a complete and utter fraud. And anyway, it had nothing to do with actual Native American herbal medicine practice, but through the 60s and 70s, that's how it was presented. So, by the time you get to the 80s and 90s, when I was a kid, about the only places you could read about herbal medicine would be in Yoga Journal or something, these New Age magazines. And we had 3 stores in town that sold herbs. One was just a vitamin shop where I worked for a while. Another one was a health food store for vegans, and the other was a head shop. It was a place for hippies to get pot smoking supplies. And so you can understand why a lot of people are kind of hesitant about herbal medicine. But when you actually get into the real history of it, like I said, all the doctors were Catholic. All the medicine was made from plants. And we've got a doctor of the church, St. Hildegard, who was probably the greatest herbalist of all time.
Now, what was the genesis of your book, Herbs That Heal? Again, available at Sophia Institute Press. What was the genesis and brought this book along?
Well, I met Steve on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. And it's kind of funny. We're both North Carolinians. He's originally from South Carolina, but we grew up just a few miles apart, essentially, when you look at the map. And we both have that kind of Southern sense of humor where we give each other a hard time. We just keep picking on each other, and that's part of just the way we do things. It's like how you do things when you're a baseball team or something. You're always giving the other guy a hard time. And so when we met, I had made a statement. It was actually on a recipe. I was saying, you can feed a family of 4 for like $10 if you do this. And he comes back, $10. How do you do that? Well, I'm like lentils and chicken broth and an onion. It's not that expensive. And he's like, but that's really cool. Do you have anything more on this? Well, I thought he was setting me up, right? I'm thinking this guy, he's getting ready, and well, he thinks I'm, messing with him at the same time. And by the time we figured it out, we realized we had a lot of common interests, and he wanted to learn about herbs. And so we started talking, and we're both Catholic, of course. And eventually it was just like, why don't we just get together and write a like super practical book of like kitchen medicine, home remedies, the kind of stuff that isn't hard to find, isn't expensive. It's either growing in your backyard, or you can get it from the grocery store, or maybe order it off of Amazon for just a few bucks, and take care of more, simple ailments. We're not talking cancer. I never say a word about cancer. It's too serious a subject. I'm not going to tell you, even though there are herbs that can help regulate your heart rate and such, I'm not going to tell you to use them if you have heart disease. You go to a doctor for that. If you break a leg or have a heart attack, go to a doctor. That's fine. We encourage you to do that. But if you have a head cold, why are you going to go spend an hour in a doctor's waiting room to see a doctor for 5 minutes for him to tell you go home and take an aspirin? There's some home remedies you can use in your kitchen. There's stuff for like menstrual cramping. There's stuff for upset stomach and diarrhea and coughs and colds and earaches and, just simple, basic home herbal medicine. Okay. And then we thought, hey, man, we're Catholic, so let's just make it a Catholic book. Let's put in stories about saints that have associations. Let's quote the Christian, the Catholic herbalists like Father Kunzel and Father Nape and Brother Aloysius and Saint Hildegard and Abbot Strabo and the Capitulaire and different things, and really root this in the Catholic tradition, because that's one of the things. I mentioned how they tried to outlaw herbal medicine in the United States. Mm-hmm. It kind of came back through the hippie movement of the 60s and 70s, right? But it was portrayed as like New Age. When I was like in the 90s working in a health food store, at any day, this didn't happen to us, but it did happen to other people in the company, the FDA would raid you. I mean, they come in with a SWAT team and take certain products off the shelf, or like look at the labeling. And if it said, this product can reduce fever, well, that's illegal. You can't make a medical claim, right? So they do stuff like that. It was actually the Mormons that got herbal medicine made legal again in the United States. Orrin Hatch was the guy that headed that fight. That would be in the 90s. In the 10s to maybe like 1910 and 1920, they were doing the same thing in Europe and in France. I mean, they totally made the practice of herbal medicine illegal. In England, about 90% illegal. In Germany, the what would become the Nazi government was really going after them. And Father Kunzel was a Catholic priest who was an herbalist, and he actually went to court and proved in the court of law that his herbs could treat, this would be type 1 diabetes at the time, type 2 hadn't really been diagnosed, could treat diabetes better than the medicines of the doctors. And so thanks to a Catholic priest, herbal medicine continued to be legal in Central Europe. Without that, we probably would have lost the entire tradition.
Now, is there scientific journals and such that back this up as well? Because I could imagine someone asking that,
Yeah.
like, does it work as well as traditional medicine, if you will?
Well, you'd have to look at what they were using at the time. We're talking like 1910. We're talking type 1 because type 2 diabetes really was not diagnosed until what was his name? Diamond Jim. I cannot remember his last name. Diamond Jim. He was a mobster. He owned a lot of restaurants. I think it was either New York or Chicago. He weighed over 400 pounds, and he was the first person diagnosed in the United States with type 2 diabetes. Before then, there just really wasn't that much sugar in the diet. So diabetes was essentially genetic. So when you look at bitter herbs, I think Father Coons, I'd have to double check, was predominantly using wormwood, which is one of the herbs mentioned in the Bible as being very bitter. And that bitter herb stimulates the liver and the gallbladder and the pancreas, actually. And it can help curb insulin spikes. It helps with digestion. It helps with indigestion. It helps with liver inflammation and all kinds of liver issues. Gentian would have been one he was using. Gentian is the second most bitter plant on earth that we've discovered so far that's edible. Some of them aren't edible, but gentian will do the same thing. And for probably 300-400 years, what they call digestive bitters was probably the predominant medicine in any form of medicine, and it would help. Well, you got to remember, there's for refrigeration, there's for pasteurization. Food might be
Yeah.
spoiled, water might be bad, so you'd use these digestive bitters to stimulate the stomach acids, and they would help prevent food poisoning. They'd also help with liver issues. People drank more alcohol than they did water because the water was bad. They were always concerned with liver inflammation and damage. And interestingly, one St. Hildegard had her own bitters recipe. You may have heard of it. She called it wormwood wine. It's become vermouth, which you put in a martini. That's thanks to St. Hildegard. Bitter herbs like hops and beer are thanks to St. Hildegard. But an herbalist that began in a parish that was under her patronage became the man known as Paracelsus Theophrastus Bombastus von Hohenheim. The most
That's a mouthful.
yeah, most controversial figure in Western medicine. He was a devout Catholic. His father had been a doctor. He went to school, and actually, one of his priests was into necromancy. I mean, he was into like all kinds of occult stuff. So this is interesting because Paracelsus denounced all occult practices, and he went on to become the most famous doctor in Europe. He was actually run out of certain countries. They tried to kill him. They put a price on his head because he would go in and treat people for free, and the doctors didn't like that because he was healing people that they couldn't heal. They were still using old formulas, and he was coming up with his own. And he would also teach college students for free in German, when at that point they had to pay and only be taught in Latin because you had to keep it in certain classes. So he was hated throughout Europe, and he was hunted down. He was accused of witchcraft and sorcery, and probably 100 books were written in his name about alchemy and sorcery, and he denounced the whole thing. At the end of his life, he was even accused of being a Protestant. And he said, "I will not burn with Luther." And so he was buried in a Catholic church, and they put up a statue for him and everything. So he's actually a pretty important Catholic figure if you can substitute fact from fiction. But he came up with a formula which was called the Great Swedish Bitters, which I learned from Maria Trevin. It's more than 30 some herbs that are just incredible. I mean, this tradition actually goes back to oh wow! I mean, it goes back to I cannot remember the guy's name, but a king in the Persian Empire who came up with a formula that was supposed to be a protection against all poisons and stings from venomous snakes and animals and such. It was, what was his name? Theriac. Theriac was the name of his formula. Well, anyway, Paracelsus turned in just this incredible herbal remedy, and you can still order it today. There's a company in Germany called, can't remember the name of the company. They call it Schweden Balsam or something like that, and make your own. And it's got wonderful antiviral properties, anti-inflammatory properties, good for digestion, helps stabilize blood sugar. And I mean, that's a Catholic remedy, really, when you think about it, because it's a Catholic guy that came up with it. And it's been around since 1530, I believe.
Now, how long did it take you to write this book?
Not as long as you'd think. When Sophia got in touch with us, they said, "It'll take a year to write it." And Steve and I are like, well, we're both self-employed and we're used to putting ourselves on hard deadlines. Let's see if we can knock it out in 6 months. And we head down. I think we actually did in about 4. And then it took another 2 or 3 months for them to edit it and for us to go back and forth and all the changes and such.
What feedback have you received about the book so far? It's been out, what, 3-4 weeks now?
Yeah, 3-4 weeks. It's been real positive. Everybody likes it. It's beautifully illustrated.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, I agree. They did a fantastic job with that. We had nothing to do with that. That's all Sophia Press. And yeah, people seem to really enjoy it. I think, it's just that moment when you realize that dandelion in my yard isn't a weed. That's food and medicine. Our ancestors actually brought dandelions here and planted them as food and medicine. And over the course of a couple of generations, we started thinking of them as weeds that have to be killed so we can have a perfect lawn. When you realize what the reason they brought it here, then you start using it, and it's like, well, what else can I use? It's growing all around me. Prickly pear cactus, but you're in Arizona, you probably get a lot of cacti.
There's a bunch of them in my neighborhood over here. It's tons.
Yeah. And purslane grows great in hot, dry climates. It's another one that was brought here for food and medicine by our ancestors. Plantain, so many of the things we think of as just weeds are really fantastic. I'll just take the dandelion, for instance. Great for the liver. It has antibiotic properties, especially for the urinary tract. Gosh, it has so many digestive qualities. It's so nutritious. People hate it. There's no reason to hate it. If at very least, gather the flowers and make some dandelion wine. It's like sunshine in a glass. It's absolutely wonderful.
Great. Now, where can our listeners, before we move on, I want to ask you a couple of questions about some of the other work you're doing. Where can our listeners get the book?
Okay, you can go to Sophia Press, you can go to Amazon, you can go to your local Catholic bookstore, and if they don't have it, please ask them to order it. You can get it at Barnes & Noble or anywhere you normally buy your books. If you go to Sophia, they get some nice discounts you can get. And one thing I have offered that I would like to see people take up, if you can get some people in your parish that want to study herbal medicine, and like y'all buy a bulk of books from Sophia, like I think 12 copies, they will give you a huge discount and a break on shipping. And once a week, I will video conference with you for free and teach you a class in herbal medicine as we work our way through the book.
Oh, very cool. Now, I know it's in paperback now. Are there any talks about making it like a ebook or anything?
Yeah, I think we got the ebook. We did the audio book, and that was weird. I normally don't read my own books, so I had to read my own book and try to remember what I was thinking at the time, so I could, realize where I'm making a joke, because this one thing Steve and I do, we make a lot of jokes. And when you're just reading through it and you're reading like 10 pages at a time, it can get a little dull. So I had to put my voice back into it. Hopefully, if it sells enough, maybe we can get a hardback at some point. That would be nice.
Okay.
I'd love to see it translated into other languages, really. Right now, it's just in English as far as I know.
Yeah, I was reading through one of the herbs. I forget which one it was. And Steve's talking about how we like fell on the sidewalk and all this other stuff. There's some comedy in there too.
Yeah.
I mean, there really is. Now, can you tell us about your podcast? You put out a new episode just a few minutes ago about the end times.
The Uncensored Catholic. Well, I've got 3 podcasts. I do the Southern Appalachian Herbs podcast. I've been doing it for 6 years. That's once a week. It's a long form, just really intense herbal podcast. I'll spend an hour talking about one plant, and the history of it, the use of it, the whole bit. I've got the Herbal Medicine for Preppers podcast, which I do through the Prepper Broadcasting Network. It's sort of like a short form of the same thing. I'll spend like 20 minutes talking about how to use this plant in an emergency, or why you want to have it on hand, when something happens. And then the Uncensored Catholic, I'll talk about a lot about Catholicism. We spent a couple years going through Father Sparago's exhaustive explanation of the Catechism of the Catholic Church from 1890. Right now, I'm doing a series on a book from also the 1890s called The End of This Present World and the Mysteries of the Life to Come, which if you ever want to know the Catholic perspective on the end times, Armageddon, the Antichrist, and all that, I highly recommend that because it's totally different from what you see in popular media, popular culture. I mean, this is not the Left Behind series. This is, real biblical teaching and teachings by saints and revelation from angels and such as that. So very very interesting. And also we'll get into politics on that's why it's uncensored. I don't cuss or anything. I just don't hold my tongue on cultural or political topics. I really let them have it on that. I send out an article about once a week through my Substack. That's Judson Carroll Substack, Judson Carroll Master Herbalist. And I'm on pretty much all social media. It's that they kicked me off of Facebook when I made fun of Dr. Fauci about 5 years ago. And apparently you cannot compare him to yogurt off of the movie Spaceballs.
Oh, man.
Our overlords get very upset when you do that. Merchandising. That's where the real money is.
Oh, man. Well, we'll leave it there. Judson, thanks so much for your time today. And I hope your book continues to do well.
Well,
I got it in the mail from Sophia Institute a few weeks ago. And follow you on Substack. Great follow, great articles. God bless the work you're doing. And thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks. Oh, and my YouTube channel. I forgot to mention that. I'm also on YouTube. Yeah. And I teach free guitar videos, lessons on there. So if you want to learn guitar or mandolin, I also do that. That's just a little bit of fun we do.
Don't you do the banjo too? That's what I heard.
Well, tenor banjo, 5-string. I play 3 different kinds of banjos, 5 different kinds of guitars, mandolin, piano, harmonica, probably a dozen instruments all total. But yeah, I stay busy.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like it. Well, God bless you. Take care. Thanks for coming on today.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.